So let's go through and do the same thing we did for the expenditure multiplier. Let's do that for the government tax multiplier as well. Again, the same. We're going to calculate the multiplier relatively the same way, except now we're going to see how much does GDP increase, how much is real GDP, how many dollars is real GDP increase. But now it's going to be a dollar decrease in federal taxes. It's not an increase. It was a dollar increase in government spending when we found the expenditure multiplier. Here, we're going to see what is the effect on GDP. How much does GDP increase when taxes decrease by that $1? So to understand this, we use this equation that represents how households break up their, or how households can allocate their income. They can allocate it between consumption, savings, and the taxes that they have to pay. So essentially what we're saying is when there's a tax cut, taxes are going to drop, and we'll use, again, this $1 example. When taxes drop by $1, well, how does that additional dollar, how is that allocated by households? Does it go towards savings? Does it go to an increase in consumption? If that increase in consumption, is that spent domestically or is it spent on exports? So how that additional dollar is spent is going to determine the magnitude of the tax multiplier. So to understand the tax multiplier, we'll walk through two different scenarios. One where the additional dollar associated with the decrease in taxes is completely consumed domestically. And that's our first scenario. So we're saying households' taxes, their tax obligations, they have to pay $1 less in taxes because of the tax cut. Well, we're going to assume that it's completely spent on domestic consumption, meaning domestic output is going to increase by $1. And then using the same multiplying effects that we saw before, well, if consumption goes up by $1, or domestic consumption goes up by $1, then domestic firms' revenues are again going to increase, which incentivizes them to hire more workers, and you see that through an increase in the labor demand curve. This is going to stimulate households' incomes and giving them more income to be able to spend on even larger increases in consumption. So what does that mean? Well, let's say that consumption initially, yes, goes up by $1 from the tax cut, but then through the multiplying effects, it increases, consumption increases by, let's say, another 75 cents. Well, if that's the case, then given our aggregate expenditure formula from before, that if consumption goes up by $1.75, then output's also going to increase by $1.75. So we saw a $1 tax cut leading to a $1.75 increase in output, meaning the tax multiplier, the value of the tax multiplier, is going to be equal to 1.75. However, this made some large assumptions about how that additional dollar is spent. Well, let's assume a more pessimistic outlook, meaning that that dollar savings isn't spent entirely on domestic consumption. And additionally, let's assume there's some crowding out that takes place. So if that additional dollar in tax savings, let's say only 75% of that is consumed. So $1 less in taxes, 75 cents of that dollar is used to buy goods and services by households. However, 20 cents is going to be spent on imports, so not domestically produced. And of that 75 cents that's consumed, 20% or 20 cents is spent on imports. And furthermore, private investment is crowded out by 35 cents, meaning that, yeah, there's going to be an increase in consumption due to the tax decrease, but investment is going to drop by 35 cents. Private investment by household and firms is going to drop by 35 cents. And imports are going to increase by 20 cents from that 75 cents, meaning that when we add up this total effect, output's only going to increase by 20 cents. And so when output only increases by 20 cents, well, we saw a $1 decrease in taxes, a $1 decrease in the revenue that's collected by the federal government through taxes. Well, that $1 decrease in revenue received by the government only resulted in 20 cents of additional output, meaning the value of the tax multiplier is equal to 0.2. And so we see a relatively mitigated effect of the tax cut on output. So that brings up the question, what's the right scenario? Well, typically, not surprisingly, the tax multiplier is estimated between 0 and 2. Again, the big factors of determining the value of the tax multiplier is, one, how much of that dollar is used in consumption, and two, if there's a tax cut today, is it going to be followed up by a tax increase in the future? If there is, well, that's going to lead households to want to save that tax cut, that additional dollar today. They're going to save a larger proportion of it in order to be able to pay future taxes down later on. So given that both the government expenditure multiplier and the government tax multiplier have a relatively large range of estimation, why does that occur? The question is, well, why? Why are these estimates so hard to judge or so hard to estimate? Well, one, we're not sure how long the multipliers will take effect, because, yeah, we're going to have this multiplying effect, and so firm revenues increase when households buy more stuff or when governments spend more money, creating an increase in household incomes, which creates an increase in consumption. But then that multiplying effect continues. If households have increased their consumption, well, then that's going to lead to even further increases in firm revenues, which is going to drive up demand for labor even more, which is going to drive up incomes, household incomes even more, which is going to drive up more consumption. So these effects take a really long time to occur. And so, yeah, these multipliers take a long time for them to occur, and we don't know exactly how long they're going to take to occur. But given that they take so long to occur, things happen in the time frame of which the multipliers are estimated. So given a large time frame, things can happen that aren't specifically a result of an increase in government spending or a decrease in taxes. So what I'm trying to say is this idea of ceteris paribus, all else equal, isn't going to hold. So these things that happen create confounding effects, which make estimation of the multipliers really hard to pinpoint.